Kia ora koutou, Agnes Snyder here, the Chief Executive for Global Women. Look, it's a real pleasure to be online this afternoon with you all, and in particular our guest, Hilary Walton. We just had a quick conversation before. I'll leave her to talk about her kind of career, but I've picked up the interesting things. So at one point, Hilary worked for MI5, which sounds really cool. I've only watched it in the movies. And then I suppose the other interesting things that between being a mum of three, she's found time to write a book, who knew, and develop an app. So yeah, so she's got some pretty amazing superpowers. So Hilary, on behalf of Global Women, we're really grateful that you can join us this afternoon. And I'll leave it to you to run the session. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the invite. Hi everyone. So I'm Hilary Walton. When I saw the Global Women series start up, I thought, you know, what a wonderful way to help others out at this really challenging time. So it's a real pleasure to be here today to talk to you about security during COVID-19. So bear with me for a moment. I'm just going to share my screen and get that going. Okay, so you should be able to see that now. Is that all good? Okay, so I'm Hilary Walton. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer, or CISO, as they call me for short, at Kordia Group. And Kordia is a state-owned enterprise. Not a lot of people know that. We are a business-to-business telecommunications company, but we run a lot of other mission-critical networks as well. So, for example, we actually transmit TV and radio for New Zealand. So that's been really important to keep going during the pandemic, because people need to get access to that information. We also protect the oceans. We have a maritime emergency operations centre which help out there. We do a lot of secure cloud connectivity and cloud migrations, and then we also have a really large cybersecurity arm, which you would expect because we're running mission critical networks. So that's part of Kordia itself, but then we also have Aura, who is our information security consultancy. So that's a bit about Kordia. It's a really diverse business, which has actually been really lucky in the current environment, as you can imagine. But what that actually means is there's quite a lot of security risks for me to manage across the business, and that's across Australia and New Zealand. So I'm really pleased to be here to talk to you about something that I'm extremely passionate about today, and that's security. I felt really drawn to technology and security throughout my career. I actually started as an organisational psychologist in the Royal New Zealand Air Force. But I've become really fascinated by digital culture ideas. So that's technology and people. Because if you think about how the technology and the internet have really significantly shaped the way people interact, behave, think and communicate. And as a psychologist, I find that fascinating. So yes, I did write a book around security culture, and that was based on my work with MI5, but then also with the London Olympic Games. With digital culture, I was keen to write a book as well, but books take a long time. The security culture book took me 2.5 years. So instead, I've turned that into sort of a YouTube channel with short digital culture videos that I put up there regularly. And then I've also fostered a community around this as well on Facebook and LinkedIn. And more recently, I've started a podcast on digital culture where I interview people who I've had the pleasure of meeting who are really clever and funny and inspire me. And I talk to them about what digital culture means to them. But what I want to talk to you today is about the fact that there's probably 4 things I want you to take away. First of all, I want you to really understand why this work from home situation is very different to the work from the office situation. So that's the first one. Secondly, I want you to have an idea of what some of these cyber attacks are that you need to watch out for and need to get your people to watch out for. Fourthly, I'm going to give you some tips and recommendations about how you can keep your business and your own personal information secure and safe. And then lastly, we're going to finish off by talking about what you need to be considering as we kind of come back down through the pandemic levels and come out of lockdown and you know, get used to the new normal. So the pandemic has really completely upended the way we work, collaborate, and do business. And this really is unprecedented disruption. So look, these are some of the joke cartoons that have gone around about COVID and digital transformation. And the point here is they're trying to really illustrate what's driving digital transformation. And it's interesting because as a psychologist, you know, who's worked in security and also in digital transformation, I know how hard digital transformation can be and how hard change is, but out of necessity. Like, we've literally had to, you know, swap around business models in a matter of days and weeks rather than years. And we've suddenly pushed forward into this new future, this new world of where we are. Covid-19 has been a black swan event. So that means it came as a surprise to most organisations, pretty much everyone, I would say. I don't think it was on my risk register at all. But also it's had a massive effect on us. So when it comes to COVID-19, businesses had to think and act super quick on leadership and technology issues. So here are some McKinsey research about what was sort of top of mind in terms of technology priorities for businesses during that real rush through the levels to lockdown and level 4. So businesses had to work out how to go remote and how to go online. And the main thing they were focusing on was around how to deploy and train people on the collaboration tools. And then they were also thinking about the increased strain through on company financials and what was that was going to do to budgets and things like that. And then I'm very pleased to see on the slide that increased cybersecurity threats was also something else that business leaders were thinking about, along with new tech-enabled business models and the strain on infrastructure. So there really was like little, almost no time to prepare systems and services to accommodate these massive changes. The pandemic caused IT professionals to have to adapt and evolve at a pace that required decisions to be made quickly and decisively, and often cutting through the usual organisational full security or risk management processes. And this is small businesses, but this is also government departments who could have had to, you know, readapt to what needed to happen and in the time it had to happen. So as business leaders, you know, you'll be keeping an eye on evaluating the potential impact of the economic downturn that this has caused. And you might be rethinking your budgets and prioritising initiatives that help generate savings and cash. But you also need to think about and keeping a close eye on those that generate value for you and your business, and thinking about how to invest in those initiatives so that your business can both weather this downturn as well as come out in a really strong position. So there's really 3 waves of response planning that we've been going through. So this was the first wave, but we're probably in between the second and third. So if we look at the first wave first, it was really focusing on what was happening right now, which was really around taking care of your people, driving adoption of new ways of working, you know, communicating to people consistently, confidently, reliably, having kind of one place for truth of information, and getting beyond the tech to make the work from home, as well as being proactive with security. Now we're more in the second wave where we're stabilising critical infrastructure, systems and processes. We've probably identified where some of our weaknesses are or gaps, and we're kind of shoring up those gaps and, you know, mitigating some of those risks. And we're looking out towards the third wave, which is about anticipating and preparing for that new normal. And, you know, re-looking at your business plans and making sure the priorities are the right ones, staying focused on customers, that kind of thing. But what's different about the COVID situation with people working from home? Well, this has really hit organisations on all fronts. So people, systems, and processes. So from a people perspective, I'll start there. Attackers always look for lapses in concentration, as this increases their opportunities to attack a business. And during times like this, it can be kind of easy to let good cybersecurity posture slip, particularly when you're distracted and under pressure to deliver and kind of get everyone working. So there's that piece. But then on top of that, we have this thing where New Zealanders are just so trusting. You know, we leave our houses open or our windows unlocked. When we're in our offices, we can often let people roam around our offices unchecked. And in 2019, we actually made we list, in fact, of the most scammed and defrauded countries in the world. We topped the list. And it's probably because we're at the bottom of the world, we think we're far away from people, and so we tend to be a more trusting nation. From a systems perspective, what you have when people are working from home is that if you don't have sort of endpoint security and layers of security on your computer devices, and a lot don't because it is an investment, then this means your people's computers are not behind the usual layers of security that they would be if they were in the office. So if they're in the office, you know, you're going out your big corporate firewall, and that's protecting you from so many nasties. But there's a whole lot of other security layers, you know, think of an onion, security in depth, a lot of other security layers that you have in an office that you just don't have at home. And the reason for that is because people are working from home, they're on their home Wi-Fi's, and they're going out through their home internet, straight to the internet, and not behind a firewall at all. So what that means is there's an increased attack surface for attackers to exploit. So if you get a cyber attack, you know, if you click on a link that you shouldn't have because you thought it was a legitimate link from a contact, but if it was something else, there's no kind of firewall to block it and a real lack of protections in place. So that's the main thing that's really different. I'll just go back. So from a process perspective, what you have is also a real lack of proper planning for how people are going to work from home, because there just wasn't time to run a really good process for most organizations. And then, to add to this, is we have this completely changed environment. We have an event that is bringing a lot of attention globally, and unfortunately, bad guys, bad actors, they thrive in bad times. They love fear, uncertainty, chaos, and that is certainly what they've got on a global scale. And we've seen already that there is increases in these COVID-themed attacks or phishing emails. This isn't a new thing though. Like, for example, in Christchurch, we saw a lot of this with the Christchurch mosque attacks last year, and then also with the Christchurch earthquakes. The bad actors, they jump on those events to take advantage to, do scams and defraud people and steal your information. But there have also been focused larger attacks on organisations already stretching their resources to cope with COVID-19. There have been massive attempts to bring down government health organisations that we've seen around the world, and then also the World Health Organization itself. Okay, so what should you be looking out for? I've got a couple of real examples of phishes that have been going around just recently. So let me show you them. Okay, this was a really popular one just a couple of weeks ago. It went like wildfire throughout organisations. And if you look at it, it looks really, like it could be from your IT department, potentially. I'll just read it out loud. It says, attention web user. As part of an annual IT tech tradition, the IT department needs to reevaluate the web directory and some login details. Please see the link below and treat as urgent as the process will only take a minute. Click on account update verification. Yes, this is compulsory. Greetings, ITC service. So, that could look like it came from your IT department. There were probably only a couple things in there that you could really, note as not being quite right. Like, one might have been the fact that it's, trying to get you to do something with urgency, and sometimes that's a big clue. But to be honest, we're in a pandemic, so potentially your IT department could want you to do something in a rush. The only part would be perhaps what you actually call your IT service desk. For example, maybe you don't call it ICT service desk, you only call it IT service desk or IS service desk. It's only little things like that which means you might not, you might pick this sort of thing out. The next one is actually a phish that came through LinkedIn. So more and more LinkedIn is actually being used as a business tool. And so this is becoming a big vector for phishes as well. They're not just coming through your corporate systems. And so this looks like a message, from my contact, Joe Exotic. I've obviously changed the names to protect the innocent here. But, it's coming from my contact. So it looks like it's coming from them. And that's because it actually is coming from my contact. However, their account's been compromised. So the other piece of this is it kind of looks like it is a OneDrive thing there. So the attackers want you to click on the OneDrive, enter your credentials, because that's what they want at the end of the day as well. The probably only tips in this one were the fact that it seems a bit odd that there's some kind of $6 million profit share at the end of the project. That's probably odd. Also, maybe I don't know Joe Exotic that well, and so it was a bit out of the blue, kind of getting this message from him. So if you're not sure what the message there is, to reach out to that person out of bounds, so through another method, a phone call or text, something like that, to actually see if it is them. So you can see they're getting pretty tricky, but bad guys are capitalizing it at the moment, and it's really frustrating because in many cases they're using information that's been gleaned from attacks and exploits over the past 5 years. And we're in this kind of perfect storm of tremendous amounts of personal information that's available about individuals. Those individuals are now working from home, and companies are struggling to provide the same levels of security and safety that they would normally have if people were back in the office. So it is a really challenging time. And then on top of this, we have this, with the pandemic coming on, everyone has jumped on social media and downloaded new apps that perhaps they didn't have before, because we had to find ways to connect with other people and consume information. And so, boom, there's been a proliferation of these being downloaded from people. So, for example, Zoom's been a really popular one. We're obviously using that today for work, but also for personal as well. A lot of people are using it. It does have that great interface. House Party app has been going around like wildfire. Also, more recently, I've seen Messenger Kids being sent around a lot of the parents that I'm dealing with. I've got 3 kids. WhatsApp is always there, but it's got really hot, and a lot of people have jumped on, and even the government is serving information up through it. Trello is another one that people are using to organise their work. It's sort of Kanban style work, and it means they can virtually organise, how work is going to get done. Now, I'm not saying these apps are particularly bad. In fact, there's only probably one up there that I have done a security review on. But, can you say that you're not using the same password and logins across those? Because if you downloaded House Party, you use the same password as WhatsApp, then, all of a sudden, you might start to notice different accounts being compromised. I know with House Party in particular, people were complaining that after downloading House Party, their Spotify account got broken into. I don't know if that's the case, but it could be that just the same credentials are being used across these different apps. But, how common is it, and why is it really happening? Well, it is really, really common. I've just shown you 2 that have been recently just sent around New Zealand. But the reason why it's so common is because they can make a lot of money out of it. It's one of the most cost-effective models to get info and then sell it for money. And actually, most of the time, they'll also have a call center, particularly on ransomware attacks. And, there'll be a call center number, you'll call them up, and the call center will guide you through how to purchase Bitcoin and how to pay. And apparently they're really, really efficient, really great call centers, best call centers in the world. Well, of course they would be, wouldn't they? And the vast majority of attacks do tend to be aimed at small to medium businesses, because they do often have poor security and are easier to breach. So all of the data that we're looking at tells us that this has been increasing. And then now with this kind of global environment, it's just kind of blowing out into this perfect storm. So why is it happening? It's the money. It's because it's hard to catch the people because they're offshore. The money's all anonymous because it's Bitcoin, and it's automated. So they can be doing thousands of attacks all the time with really minimal effort. So that's why it is so important to consider. So where do you start with all of this then? Where do you start? Well, these are my best recommendations to help you work securely from home. So the first one is use a password manager. And this is a big one for me. It's my mission this year is to just encourage more people to use password managers. This is how you should be managing your passwords. I know in the past it's been like, oh, should I be using a password manager or not? I'm not sure. The answer is yes. Now, I'm not talking about the password rememberer that's in your Chrome browser. That's not a password manager. You need to get a proper one. There's lots of free ones out there. I don't care which one you use. Pick one that's really user-friendly. You do want to have that kind of browser add-in because that does make it easier to work with. But they are great. They mean you can have different passwords for all your accounts, and it will actually spot if you do have the same password used across accounts. It'll help you generate secure passwords, and like I just can't push past the use of password managers enough. Next on the list there is to be extra vigilant about phishing during this time. And I know that sounds probably like a bit like a broken record, but you know, people are in their home environments, potentially more relaxed, maybe in their pajamas, hopefully not, but we need people at this time to be extra vigilant. The next one down there is don't provide any personal financial information in emails, texts, or instant messages. Often cyber attacks will be asking you to call them back up or send them messages, and just don't provide any of that information via those mechanisms as well. Next, you really need to keep up to date with your malware and virus protection. So hopefully your organisation worked out how to update those for staff while we're all remote. If they haven't, they'll want to figure out how to do that. But also, it may require staff to, for example, fire up their VPN to actually collect those updates. So you might need to remind staff to do that. Also, it's really good practice to actually shut your computer down at the end of the day and open it up the next morning because, well, it saves your battery life, but also it does help pick up the security updates that you need. The next point down there is encouraging staff to save their files to the right place. And this sounds kind of simple, but as we work remotely and maybe we've got to fire up a VPN to get into a file drive, things like that can become, just a little bit more friction, a little bit more hard. But it's really important to make sure people get your organisational information back where it belongs, so that it can be protected, it can be backed up, and so that you've got it. MFA is the next one. That stands for multi-factor authentication, and this is another biggie for me. You should MFA everything that you can, or don't at your own peril. MFA can also be called two-factor authentication. One place in particular I'm encouraging people to do this is on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn have a very easy way to enable MFA, or two-factor authentication, and that means that it'll make it more tricky for criminals to use your LinkedIn account to send those phishing emails out to your contacts, and how embarrassing would that be as well. So just Google enable MFA on LinkedIn, and then it will step you through it. The good thing about that is LinkedIn is a Microsoft product, so they use the Microsoft Authenticator app, which a lot of people will already have on their phone if they're using Office 365. So that's really handy. And the last thing here is if you've clicked on something you should have, if you've entered your credentials when you shouldn't have, then tell your IT department as soon as possible. The sooner they know, the better they can deal with it. Don't just sort of pretend it didn't happen and maybe the IT department will pick up on it, because during this work from home time, They might not have the same visibility of what you're doing on your computer. My next big message here is that cybersecurity is a business risk. It's not an IT risk. Now, this is kind of an old message, but I thought it was worth kind of bringing up here. If it's not on your business risk register, you need to put it on there. It's about having a risk plan in place and good governance, and you should have a number of key initiatives that you're going to do over the year to close some of those gaps and push up your cyber maturity. So make sure you're doing that. And if you're planning on more digital transformation, which you could well be, then make sure you take a planned approach with that. Design security in from the start, because it is expensive to retrofit it later or have to completely redo work. Okay, and now as we're coming out of lockdown, as we're coming down the levels and getting out of COVID, I don't know if that's the right phrase, but it's what I've used here. Here are my top tips. So again, back to risk management, keep assessing and reassessing the risks. Track progress of any mitigations you put in place, and think about those risks as they apply to people, systems, and processes. Try and figure out what you're lacking in. If you don't already have staff awareness and sort of cybersecurity training, then this is a really important time to make sure you get that out to your staff. Your staff are your first line of defense. They're the people who are going to spot things that aren't quite right. And so you need to teach them what to look out for. Do they know what a phishing email, what the telltale signs of a phishing email are? The next point down says communicate your work from home policy. So I put communicate there really purposefully because it's not just about having a work from home policy or updating your old one. It's actually communicating that out. So maybe your policy needs to just sit in a drawer and it's more about creating an engaging PowerPoint or a video like this, or it might be a list or a diagram or a picture, but make sure you communicate how you want people to be behaving during this time. It's you need to go where the people are. Don't expect them to read a policy, and it's more important than ever at the moment. Another key point I've got there is as we rush through that wave 1 and into wave 2, is you may have made, or you might not even be aware of, but your company, your business may have made some security exceptions. You rushed out the delivery of your collaboration tools, or you bought in that new app, or whatever it is. So at some point, you need to potentially unwind those exemptions. So first of all, you need to know what they are, make sure you've got that list, and then put a reminder somewhere so that you're coming back to it in a month's time or 2 months' time and unwinding that and changing it back as normal or whatever it might be. At the end of this, we're also really going to want to encourage staff to have a clean-up. So as I said, staff might not be putting your organisational information back where it's supposed to be. And they also may have just collected a bunch of stuff on their desktop, for example, that's not been backed up. Or they may even be on their own personal computer, and that's collected a whole bunch of organisational information. At the end of this, we really need to have a bit of a spring clean so that organisational information goes back where it belongs and it gets deleted off any personal drives, devices, emails, that kind of thing. It's quite important to stay up to date at this time, and CERT NZ are a government-funded body that help organisations in New Zealand do just that. They have some quite good advice on there around cyber attacks at this time and working from home and what you need to do as you're moving through the different levels. So I definitely recommend you have a look at that. And my last point is really a point for you. So as senior leaders in your company, you need to back your security initiatives. The reason I do that is because of a psychological reason, is that people follow the expectations of senior leaders. We know this. And if you don't go first, if you don't lead from the top, then why should anyone else bother? So think about some ways that you can show your visible support for security initiatives. And it might be as simple as something our CEO did recently, which was I sent out a security awareness email with a video on it. And then he replied all to that and said, this was a great video, really encourage you to watch it, great job security team, whatever it might be. But think about how you can visibly, at this time when you're not visible, show your support for security. Okay, so I just want to leave you with this quote here before we move to Q&A. So, true cybersecurity is preparing for what's next, not for what's last. And yes, that's quite poignant in this time, I think. Okay, so now we'll move into Q&A and see if there are any questions there, and I'll have a go at answering them as best I can. So let me just pull them up. Okay, so got one from Jenny, which says, since I started using Zoom, I didn't immediately quit the app after a session. My email, Word, etc. can now be slow in operating. Could Zoom be causing this? Thank you. I'm actually not sure about that, I'm sorry, Jenny. It is good, definitely good practice though, to make sure that you close out of any meetings that you might have been in and close down apps as well. It could have been an internet issue if you had a number of things running also. This is going to sound really terrible, but like I do fully agree in turning something off and turning something on. Sometimes that just flushes out all sorts of nasties as well. So thanks, Jenny. Okay, Kate, are there any firewalls or security products that you would recommend for working from home computers? Yeah, this is a difficult one. So usually, unless you're kind of a techie nerd, then you're not really likely to have any firewalls going on in the house. I can certainly speak to the technical team that I do have at Audia and see if they do have any recommendations for that and come back to the group. So thanks, Kate. So there was one question from Caroline Oakley Brown as well, but it doesn't quite say, I don't think, what it was relating to. It says, can you give us some examples, please? Just see. Oh, password manager examples. Yes, absolutely. So 1Password is one type of password manager. I personally use LastPass because it's very user-friendly. KeyPass is another that you could take a look at. There's quite a few on the market. So yeah, asking around who uses what and going for something really user-friendly would definitely be my recommendation. Okay, Felicity Evans, thank you very much. Question from you. So can you recommend at least a couple of password tools? Okay, so I think we've got that done as well. Are there any other questions from anyone out there? No, well, I think that might be it. We might be getting to the end of the session, Agnes.
Cool, da.
Hi.
I had a question.
Yes.
So just in terms of, we talk about and we've got staff that store work-related things on their personal devices. And I suppose that question is that what is this thing about how much should we allow work-related to be stored or accessed through personal devices as opposed to through work devices?
Yeah, well, the preference and best practice really is to keep those separate. So, making sure that if people are sending emails for work, that they're on work emails rather than personal ones. That people are using work computers rather than personal ones, because you sort of do have that risk of information just being left on a personal computer. But it can get pretty tricky when you start to think about phones and things like that as well, right? Because a lot of people have work phones, but other people use their, BYOD, they bring their own device to work.
Yeah.
Ideally, you want to keep it separate.
Yeah, and also even just kind of the data systems that we use to store information, and the fact that we can kind of access them remotely. I came from a university and there were certain things that we couldn't access remotely and we shouldn't have. But I do notice in other places the accessibility to institutional information that people access, but obviously access when they're sitting at home or somewhere else.
Yes.
That can be viewable to other people who it shouldn't be viewable to.
Yeah, And it does also kind of call to the importance of, your joining, moving, leaving processes as well. So that when someone moves a team, that you actually do change the access to what the new team requires, not just inherit access from the past. And then also when people are exiting from an organisation, that you make sure that they can't access those accounts and things that they may have been able to access from home. That you kind of block those as well. That's quite important at this time. Something else which I've been thinking a bit about as well through the pandemic, and as we're kind of coming out the other end of it, is third-party risk has always been a big risk for organisations. Making sure that they've got the same security controls as you and things like that. But particularly at this time, it's actually having a think about the robustness of your third-party, IT provider, because New Zealand is made up of lots of little businesses, and some of them may not be able to weather the storm as well as others. So it doesn't, if you've got a small party IT provider, it doesn't mean you move away from them. But if it gets to the point, you might have to have discussions with them and say, what's your business continuity plan for this pandemic, and how are you going to keep delivering the services that we need? And if you do get to a point where you're really concerned about it, then having a backup in mind, so if you need to move, you can kind of move fast, and making sure you've got any documentation that you might require to be able to hand responsibility over to someone else as well. Kind of a bit of a reality of this situation also.
Yeah, no, that's true. I see there was a question from, I'll leave you to answer those.
Yeah, so that's from Felicity. So do you think the trend of BYOD might change post-COVID, or will firewalls be extended? I think with more and more people working from home, so I think some of the stats I've seen is before this, it was kind of about 5% of people worked from home kind of regularly. The stats now that there's probably going to see that rise up to about 30%. So what that means is that you're probably going to have organisations want to protect, put more security in place for work from home situation, where it was only a few people before, it could be a lot more. So I think we will see more, endpoint security on computers and things like that, so that organisations can pick up what's going on your computer, even though you might not be in the office. In terms of whether there's a trend for bringing your own device or not, again, that's an interesting one. I think we probably will see more company enrolled devices. So you might bring your own device to work, but you have to enroll it in your company, and then they manage it, from a policy kind of level. We'll probably see more of that, and probably more acceptable too.
Mm-hmm. And there's another question from Victoria. Can you see that one?
Right. I can, yep. How much industrial espionage, theft of ideas, IP, copyright, trade secrets are we seeing in New Zealand? So that does always go on, and when you're talking about industrial espionage, it does tend to be the bigger kind of state kind of players or big organisational players who are doing that. So what that means is they're more organised, they have a lot more money behind them. So the thing is, because we're in New Zealand, that doesn't mean we're, it still applies to us, because actually cybersecurity happens on a global scale. So we do see this in New Zealand. The exact amount, I'm not sure. It'll depend on different events that are going on around the world. And, if there was a big news item about one of the New Zealand companies, then you probably see more cyber attacks around it. So yeah, it definitely happens.
There's another one there from Sheridan. I can't see it though. Hilary?
Oh, Sheridan, sorry, it's two. Hilary, would you recommend that boards or CEOs get the IT team to undertake a post-incident review of the effectiveness of their COVID-19 DR BCP response? Yeah, and you don't want to lose the good things and don't want to forget the mistakes. That is so true. After all of this does come to an end, or even things kind of start normalizing into whatever this new normal is, that's an absolutely great suggestion, Sheridan. So, I think we do need to learn from this situation, what worked well, what didn't, And also, like I said, if there are gaps that we've opened up around our organisation, then we need to make sure that we're in that continuous improvement way, closing those gaps and improving them. So that's a great suggestion. I'd definitely recommend that.
Mm. And I suppose just because I can, just in terms of thinking about things that are, that we're going to have again, like the Olympic Games and all of those things, are there things that will come from what's happened now that will reach across to future kind of activities like that, given your own involvement with one of the Olympic kind of?
So what do you mean exactly, Ignace?
Well, so the learnings that we've got from this, you've talked about, that the things that we need to keep top of mind and how do we close them off and how do we finish them off. Do you see any of those things that and this might be an unfair question, that we need to continue to think about, going forward when we're bringing mass people back together again?
Yeah, I think there's always, you do always definitely need to make sure you remember those learnings. So not quite answering your question, but like, for example, I know even with the Christchurch earthquakes and the recovery from that and the regeneration of Christchurch in terms of that, we're looking to apply those kind of learnings to the economic recovery for Christchurch in New Zealand. So there are always lessons that can be learned, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of research done on this as well. Because if we have to ramp up quickly like this again for something else, then we need to be able to have learned those lessons from the past.
And I suppose the other, the government set up these kind of command centres. So has there been a group working on the cybersecurity kind of, piece of what's been happening in this country?
Yeah, there has. There've been a lot of government groups that have gotten together over this. Some of the key ones, the Government Communications Security Bureau and the National Cybersecurity Centre, they've been very involved, particularly with government agencies, to get the right advice out to them so that they can take on new software in a safe way. So seeing lots of that. There's some of the government groups that I belong to, there's been a lot of collaboration and sharing of knowledge and support. So that's been really good to see. But also what I've seen is sharing and collaboration between organisations and in ways that I didn't expect either. Because what happened was when this hit, everyone went, right, okay, need a pandemic plan, need a work from home securely plan, need to tell managers, how to work with remote teams kind of, resource. And so everyone went to make their own work. And then kind of went, hold on, someone else will be doing this as well. What have you got? Can I share that? And then I'll show you mine. And then, so there was a lot of sharing, which I'm seeing going on. And I really hope that continues. The whole sharing is caring. And, if we're all reinventing the wheel, that's just so inefficient. So great to see and have that collaboration keep continuing, I would say.
And so do you see kind of new policies or new practices that will come about because of it?
So I do wonder if there'll be less face-to-face meetings, because even in the office, people may run meetings virtually from their computer, even though everyone's in the office, if you know what I mean, because you can't fit in the same rooms that we used to be able to fit in. And, we are sort of expecting this to go on for a while. So I think there will definitely be new behaviours that come out of this. I hope everyone here is going to download a password manager, start implementing that. You can put your work in there as well as your personal. It is so important that we have those kind of behaviours as well. So hopefully that's a big behavioural change out of this.
Go fine. Do we have any other questions? I don't think so. I can't see them, Hilary, so sorry.
Oh, no, there isn't, sorry.
Did you have any kind of closing comments you'd like to make?
So I guess to close, maybe if I just give some thought to what some good governance questions, which is actually probably one of the last questions that came up since you're all in that space. So you'll be wanting to have a view of what's the security risk assessment now. You probably knew what the risks were, but what are they now and how they change, and what is happening to close some of those gaps. You might want to ask questions about those security exemptions, which may have kind of happened on the fly. are there, what are they, and are we comfortable with what's been done there against, the board's risk appetite or senior management's risk appetite. You want to be keeping an eye on the amount of communications or security awareness that your staff are getting. So it may be more important for the board to see, just what kind of communication or messages have gone out to staff over the past month. And you'll be wanting to find some phishing kind of messages in there because, as I said, it is so important. And maybe a good question to ask your IT team is, or security team is, given where we are now, and you're probably lining up for a new financial year with new strategies and business processes, given where we are now, does anything in the security strategy need to change based on where you are and what you're doing? So yeah, that's my final words. Hope that's helpful.
Hey, look, thanks to everybody who joined the conference, the session today. Look, Hilary, I think for me, at least, listening in and seeing the things is that you've given us a really good kind of high level to think about, but also really practical. And I have taken away a couple of things that as a chief executive, I need to tidy up a little bit and think about. So really, really appreciate your time today. And thank you to everybody who signed in.
All right. Welcome. It was such a pleasure. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day.